Styrmir was a word in Old Norse that means, roughly translated, one that causes storms. Or, at least, that was what I was always told. But I couldn't understand just why I was named that. Was it just for cool metaphorical effect? Or was it hopes from my birth parents? Or did it just think it was a cool, quote unquote, bad name? Well, heck, who even were my parents in that case? For sure, not any people with any sort of moral or ethical sympathy for their daughter, because goodness, it was a terrible name to be given the quietest kid in a meteorology class where everyone knew the meaning behind it. Hey, Steermere, how's the storm, eh? Hey, Steermere, join our group forward project. We're bound to stir up a storm, and we'll all ace it. Hey, Steermere. Oh, for the sake of goodness, shut up. I seriously regretted ever having a crush on the guy who invited me into the project. In the end, no storm ever turned up, and we had to use the weather broadcast in the news to do our assignment. They meant well, though. Despite the teasing remarks, the class was well behaved, which was a high school dream that happened nearly never. I glared out the window of the classroom. Last period of the day, meteorology. It had been pretty much a free period, being the day we turned in the largest final project of the year. There was still like a month left of school, but our teacher was merciful enough. Merciful, or in his words, I don't want to have to teach you anvil tops for another month, so this is going to be your last graded assignment of the year. Now you're free to do whatever you want, Miss Class. Just don't commit anarchy or arson and you're fine. As you probably expect, the class erupted into cheers when he gave that speech. An anvil top is the very top of a cumulonimbus cloud. Those giant tall storm clouds with a flat top that sometimes resemble an anvil. The idea was that Mr. Henry thought we were a bunch of idiots who were as high as the anvil top in his class from all the laughing. He wasn't entirely wrong. My own reflection glared back at me. With blue eyes and fiery red hair, I stood out in the crowd. He couldn't miss me even if he tried. Behind the glass pane, heavy rain and hail plummeted past, slamming to the ground as if they were trying to murder all insects. Being a meteorology student, it was impossible not to think about all the variables and factors that played into creating any type of storm. Oh, Styrmir! Kyle, the idiot who calls himself my friend and the one who dragged me into his group project, came and sat next to me. He had a stupid grin that suggested he had either a joke or a pickup line on his tongue, or he was about to yell at the top of his lungs, 5 octaves above the average human pitch, across the room to hear a response from a similarly crazy person he called a friend. Both scenarios had happened before, and somehow he still had good grades with our temperamental teacher. They were more like deranged dolphins than humans. Did you call that storm? Are you finally flexing your godly powers on us lowly humans? Oh, Styrmir, goddess of storms and hot hairstyles. I will slap you. Oh, and I would. I wasn't kidding. I had my hair down that day. I didn't even bother combing it because I knew it would hail. Perks of being a meteorology student. I knew things that even the news couldn't pick up on. I directed my glare at Kyle, who was struggling not to burst out laughing at his own remark, clutching his stomach. Good. Suffer. Oh no! Kyle exclaimed melodramatically. Save me! Riker, help! The goddess of storms and hot hairstyles wants to slap me to oblivion. I don't know what to do. I flicked him in the forehead. He yelled in exaggerated pain. The bell rang just then, and half the class whooped and skipped out, forgetting to open their umbrellas and getting pummeled, including Kyle. The relatively sensible ones grabbed their umbrellas first to avoid death by idiocy. I left the classroom last. It was a Friday, so thankfully I wouldn't be surrounded by mentally unhinged, deranged dolphins for the next 2 days. I didn't have an umbrella, and I had never bothered with one. I'd walked through worse weather without it, and it helped with meteorology assignments, as I would often observe the downdrafts and updrafts, the cloud formations, the wind, and other factors. Meteorology simply came easy to me. I understood it in ways I couldn't explain. Today felt strange. I had correctly predicted this hailstorm yesterday in class. I knew I would get extra credit for it, but something felt off about it today. There was something missing. I furrowed my brows as the hail plummeted me. They were decent sized, with a few larger than the others. I tried to shrug it off as I kept walking, leaving campus, my entire body soaked. I crossed this crosswalk with a group of students, then turned downtown. I had my afternoon bookstore shift on Fridays, and this was perhaps the worst time to not bring an umbrella. But I had a spare set of clothes in my backpack. It would be fine, I was sure. The bookstore was a cozy little place in downtown that was actually also a cafe. Or, at least, there was a bar. It was a unique bookstore in that sense. People could walk in and order a coffee or two, or, if you're me, four, and pick out something to read while you're on break, with a hot cup in your hand. The store didn't restrict the perusal of books for free inside the store. You could rent or buy the book to take it outside. It was also family owned by the nicest couple in the city, and I considered them more like my parents than my actual parents, who I didn't even know. That was a topic for another day, however. Passing by countless people, faces who I would never remember and never know, the hail pummeling me, and the wind blowing against me as if trying to stop my progress, I was utterly silent. I never talked much outside of school and the bookstore. There wasn't much to talk about, nor were there people to talk to. To the outside viewer, the change and transition between the loud, slightly chaotic Steermere in the meteorology classroom to the quiet, wordless Steermere on the streets would be jarring. To me, it was simply second nature to be quiet surrounded by people. Steermere was an ironic name. It would suit Kyle better, or Mr. Henry, who was always enthusiastic about meteorology, and was actually quite a famous meteorologist in the community. But for reasons I could not fathom, my parents decided to give me that name when they embroidered it into a handkerchief and tucked it into a basket with me, before leaving it on the steps of a foster care center. But as I entered the downtown metropolis, the feeling became unbearable. Something just didn't feel right. Perhaps it was the updraft. There shouldn't be quite an updraft. And where was the lightning? There should be lightning. My phone buzzed with an unfamiliar rhythm in a pocket on my backpack. It was pressed against my body so I could feel any vibrations that came from the device. I frowned and paused in the middle of the sidewalk. I never got messages. I didn't have anyone's phone number, and the only way I communicated was through email. I know, I was old schooled. Deal with it. I pushed open the door into a random cafe and stood in a corner, ignoring the disgruntled looks from the barista and the bartender as the water dripped onto the tiled floor. This was just a temporary situation, as I pulled out my phone. There was a notification from a weather app, more specifically, a weather app created by me and a few others that year as a group project. There was this guy, Riker, his name was, who was nerdy enough to know all about programming, so we made an advanced weather app for meteorologists. It was scarily accurate, and so now Mr. Henry made it mandatory for the rest of the class to have the app. But I didn't know it had a warning notification system. Severe updraft warning. Hold on to your hats, boys and girls. It's about to get intense. Get ready for the biggest lightning show of your lives. Right. Next thing on to-do list for Monday. Punch Riker in the face for making that notification. I put away my phone and quickly exited the building as the waits behind the glares of the bartenders were getting more intense. But I needed to think about the warning as I walked. Severe updraft? It was right, there was an unusual updraft, and the storm was missing a few lightning. But where was the lightning? I looked up. And that, my friends, has become the worst decision of my life.